Hello and welcome to the webinar of highly valuable test repositories. You don't know where to go, where to know where to start. So as we all know, testing is not as easy as people think it is. You need to know what test to run when regression test cases are to run, ensuring that everyone is agreeing, everyone understands what needs to happen, and ensuring that what the test cases will look like. We have to ensure everything is all in sync, that everyone understands what is going on. It's not just the tester, him or herself, that is doing the work with all the documentation and how to get the work done. So as we look through, most organizations, a test repository for the most part could be unstructured. And that unstructured repository has a lot of implications internally within the organization and externally. Internally, most of the time, if it's not structured, maybe you're creating test cases from scratch for each project, which then creates duplicate or triplicate or more test cases that are testing the same thing. You now have traceability issues and inconsistency across, even in Agile. Ensuring that you have a test case traced back to a user story or to a ticket is key to ensure that there's something that's reusable. And with that, you have external frustrations where the stakeholders don't understand what the test cases are, what's being tested. Sometimes we might be mitigating the wrong risk. You might be testing something that, based on what the test case says or what is being used, is not what should be used. And then in the end, when you have those two issues happen externally, you're going to have client issues, client finding issues going across, and not just in user acceptance testing, but in production. You're going to have clients calling in to the support department with issues. So the part of having a structured test repository is ensuring that things are smooth. You know what needs to be tested. You have the ability to reuse these cases. You're avoiding confusion. And in the end, you're actually helping automation get their work done as well. So in the end, what happens is with a structured environment, you're now creating something where it's continuously improving. Your flow is continuously improving. And you can now focus on additional issues that may come up. So this webinar, as we go through, is this the right webinar for you? What are you going to get out of this? Well, if you're someone that likes to make things better and make things improve as you go along, not just within the testing team, but for developers, product owners, project managers, business analysts, anyone involved within the project. If your goal is to make things better for everyone, this is the thing for you. What you'll get in the end is you'll get an understanding of what a structured repository would look like, how it improves your flow, makes things more fluid, and it makes things easier in the end. So that understanding will help everyone involved and not just someone managing the repository. So as we go through, let's understand where I'm coming from with this idea, with this easy way to get things done. Is I've been in QA, I've done QA and testing for many years, multiple decades. And over time, I found that a lot of projects, we were starting from scratch. We were just starting over, rewriting test cases over and over again. We're finding that trying to leverage previous work or other person's work was difficult because there was inconsistencies across. Trying to plan an estimate, those were nightmares, especially in a waterfall environment. Those are issues. And then dealing with the complaints with the stakeholders that we're either testing too much or not testing enough. And in the end, you also have reporting issues getting through. I've experienced all of this. And what I found was there was one way to ensure that, to eliminate all these frustrations, to eliminate these issues for QA leads, QA managers, executives, senior managers, anyone involved within the development process and the testing process within it on how to make things better and how to get the right reports and the right data and the right information across to become more efficient and effective. Because that's the key thing, is that we want to succeed. We want to be able to build that bridge to success, not just from a QA team, but for the development team, for the project, for the organization. Ensuring this right repository is there, that is structured and is set up, is going to lead to that success. Just from a team perspective, even from an individual perspective, to help them improve and become more efficient and effective. So some of the things that go on without a structured and test repository is just there's questions, there's confusion as to where everything is, what to use, and how to use it. One of the other things is like, and when you don't understand what to use and how to use it, is now you're getting to a point where you could be missing the mark. You're not hitting the right target of what you want to test. The way the test cases are described, written, structured, where what files they're in, may lead someone to believe that they are testing the right thing when they're rerunning them or reusing them. But in the end, they could be missing the mark. There's something wrong. They may be getting close to the bullseye, but they're not actually hitting it. And because of that, now you got things that are inconsistent. If you don't have a structured environment where the test cases are located and stored, now you have multiple hands touching, multiple hands in the pot, as the saying goes, too many cooks in the kitchen, where there's so much stuff going on at the time that there's no consistency, there's no structure. And because of that, Jane Smith may think certain test cases should be written one way, while John Doe thinks about it another way. And when someone comes in and tries to use both their cases and doesn't understand what's going on, they may miss that mark. And because of this inconsistency, now you have an overflow of test cases. This is where you run into the environment where you have those duplicate, triplicate, quadruplicate test cases. And now you're creating a repository that is just overflow with information that it can't be used, and sometimes it just becomes too hard to use, and there's the mechanism to deal with it is just to ignore it sometimes and start fresh. So what we need to do is we need to ensure that there's that common understanding. A common understanding within the structure ensures that everyone knows where to do, what to do, and how to do it. And when you have that, now you have an effective planning mechanism, not only from a waterfall perspective, but from an agile or iterative perspective when you're running regression tests, when you're running automation tests, when you're reusing test cases from previous releases to meet the new features or maybe updated features to meet the demand. And in doing such, now you're creating a now efficient way of getting the work done. And in getting that work done efficiently is key for everything. It's the main process of QA, of quality assurance, is you want to make things better, not just for yourself, but for everyone that you work with and everyone that is involved. And having that test case repository is a good foundation to ensure that everyone's work becomes better. And now you're creating that knowledge sharing environment where everyone seems to be will be on the page. Doesn't seem to be on the same page. They will be on the same page when there's that understanding of how to get there and sharing those ideas. And in an agile environment, the team, everyone is sharing ideas, sharing how things get done. And a good test case repository helps with that. In that now the sole focus would not be just the QA, the tester within the team to get the work done, everyone will understand how the work gets done and to move forward. And that creates that better team environment where everyone's able to work together. So, how do we get a good structured system? How do we understand and make sure that the teams can see and feel the flow and understand the flow of being more effective and efficient? Well, there has to be a structured system. And some of the systems is like a Dewey Decimal System for naming. And in doing such, you'll have now compartments. You'll make reviews needed. You'll have to understand where everything is placed. And now you'll be able to find exactly what you need to pinpoint. And this ties into the traceability. So no longer are you going to have a mixed up path to get to the end. Everyone understands where they start and where they need to go. But having that structured naming convention will get you a straighter line. You will no longer have to like the knot of turns, twists and turns to get to where you need to get. You now have an environment where you're where you need to be. And to figure out this naming convention is relatively easy if you look at it from a Dewey Decimal perspective. Most people will use acronyms or names within. And the unfortunate part of it is there's no consistency across. Even when you have use acronyms, things don't really tell you what they're being tested. If you're looking at a Dewey Decimal System, you can create a nice legend and you have almost unlimited number of components that you can use. And one of the components, the way to see it is the first two digits would be the application, and then dot the next 2 3 digits could be the component, the main feature, and then the next 2 digits could be identification of whether it's a positive or negative test case. And then the last 3 digits could be the actual test case number. So in breaking that down, now you also have a numbering system that can be reused amongst all other components and all other applications. So say your organization has 4 applications. Well, the first 2 digits will determine what those applications are, whether it's like 01, 02, 03, however you want to do it, but be consistent about it. And then the next 3 digits, say there's a reporting function on all those applications. Well, a report could be, say, 001. So anytime anyone sees application 02 and then the next dot 001, they'll know that those are reporting test cases for that particular app. And it keeps it consistent. And it's easy to use and easy to follow. So having that structured naming convention helps you get to where you need to get. What it'll also do is it'll help componentize your test cases. Now you won't have, say, one folder that has 100 test cases in it, because that 100 test cases could be a mix of positive, negative, and different functions and features all within it, where they could be the same as all like maybe other test cases in a different folder, just under a different name, maybe different under a different flow. But who knows how things are structured within that type of case. I've seen files in one structure in one function where the test cases, nowhere to rely, were ID'd as test case 1, test case 2, test case 3, down to test case 300. And that was within one folder. And if you go into those test cases, you will see multiple steps, like close to 90, some had close to 90 some odd steps in them, where there were multiple actions within each. So breaking it down by component, shortening the steps and having a better flow and understanding makes things much more efficient and effective in identifying and everyone understanding what is being tested. And it also ensures that you're organized, you're keeping things structured, and identifying them in a structured way will get you where you need to go. In the end, what happens is you're no longer wasting hours, you're no longer wasting time trying to find those cases, trying to work through those past projects. You now have a structured naming convention based on the application and understanding as you go through. Now, within the actual test case description, which we'll go into later, there are parts where you can put in which project this test case was for. But now you are keeping it within the application, within the function. Most organizations, when they're keeping a repository, they base it on a project, not on the application. And because of such, now that's where you get into a lot of wasted hours trying to filter through all these past projects to see if there's something that can be used. When as you don't need that. If you keep it within the app and structure the case itself by project and link it in, now you have an area where you can ensure that you're not creating duplicate test cases and you're keeping your functions and your structure as minimal as possible, as more effective and efficient as possible, than having multiple files to go through. To get there is going to take work. A lot of organizations with applications, let's just say more older than 5 years old, they could have a test repository that is enormous. They could, it could be just almost insurmountable to get through. But to create that structure is going to take time, is a bit of hard work, but in the end, it's a lot better for the organization, for the teams, when that structure is there. Because now you're going to create that structure is going to take like climbing a mountain. It's going to be a lot of hard work, but once you get to the top, once you create that structure, the naming convention and component, all those test cases, now it's all downhill. It's easier to identify cases to run. It's easier to identify test cases that are obsolete. It's easier to identify test cases that if there is a change in the feature, there can be a quick change to the actual test case. And in doing such like this, there are ways, boundless ways that this will affect everyone else more positively. And that think about from an automation team perspective. If you have good traceability and a good test repository for these cases where things are done manually, or maybe there are cases where automation teams are working alongside with the people kind of testing manually. Now they can have that traceability going across and they can see when there are changes going in. So things we need to understand going forward, the next step would be to understand the test case description. A lot of organizations, a lot of testers that I've come across have different ways of writing the description. And because of that, things don't match up where you have teams that one person will write one way, one person will write in another. Like I've seen some test cases where they're written as a paragraph or two. I've seen some test cases where they are written as just steps and with no description, no understanding of what the test case is. And in doing stuff like that, you don't know where to start and what's actually being tested. And sometimes there may be too much information. And in the end, it may just feel that, you know what, I can just start from scratch. It'll be much easier to go forward. I'll write my own test case. And in doing that is now creating your duplicating, triplicating, quadruplicating test case. You're creating an environment where you're now taking up storage space that doesn't need to be taken up. And you understand that what are the results that you're getting? Sometimes when you write in a paragraph form, it's lost on what the test case is actually looking at. Now, it may give some results and you may understand, you may have to go through the steps to see what's going on. But even then, going through that and going through the steps, you may not be consistent in what to expect and what to get out of the test case as it's being run. And because we're writing these test cases in this form, there is a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation of the effort needed to get the work done. Some people say testing takes too long. The work effort's inconsistent. We don't understand why one team's doing this while the other team is doing that, which then falls on the reporting. If there's any quality metrics that are being used with a unstructured test repository, as you look through it, the reporting will not really tell you the story as to what's going on and could lead to looking left when you should be looking right at issues. The way the test case description should be, it should be relatively simple. It should be easy to understand, and not just for the test team or for the developers to understand, but for product owners, business analysts, users, stakeholders, anyone that wants to review the test case. They should be able to go into a description and see what the test case is actually doing with relative ease, with very little training. And when you create that test case description, what happens is now you're getting closer to your target. Chances are you are hitting your target because now you're keeping that structured test case description with ease and understanding for everyone to know and how to work through to get to the end result. With that description and that format, you're now able to create a better kind of radar as to what needs to get done. You will see what is around you and what is the right path and what are the right test cases to gather together, put them in a flow, and test what needs to be tested. You're now seeing what needs to understand and what to go forward. And now everyone else will understand what's happening. They'll be able to see what the test cases are doing. They'll actually be able to provide input and understanding is like, I don't think maybe this test case is the right one. Shouldn't we be looking at this? There's no more confusion. And when everyone is on the same page, now it becomes more effective in how we test and how the product gets developed. Because now everyone knows what to expect. Everyone has that understanding. And now you're able to create a reusable environment. And that is one of the key things. If you look at how developers develop code, developers will try to reuse as much code as possible to get the work done, to be effective and efficient. There's no point in rewriting the same script or the same bits of code over and over and over again when you can reuse what you're doing, maybe change a couple of parameters, but reusing code going across. We should be doing the same thing for test cases. And to do that, you need to have the right description and to componentize those test cases to add into a flow and to change what needs to be changed based on any feature changes, requirement changes, or requirements that are there. And in doing such, now you're narrowing your focus on what needs to be done. You're now pinpointing what area needs to be tested. You're now providing the right view and estimate and workload and reporting of what needs to be tested. You're not doing a scatter shot of test cases hoping that you're testing as much as you need to test. Creating this repository now allows you to pinpoint that focus. It helps you create a better traceability matrix. Traceability from requirement, user story, to test case, to code. And now understanding that sort of traceability, once that's all there and the teams are working together to get to work done, any changes that happen, there's the understanding of what's impact within the flow, within the function. So within the description, you got to keep it simple. There's using bullet points. Don't use paragraph forms or sentence forms. Those those are based on, and those are written on from what that individual feels they should write and how their writing style is. If you have it in a bullet point form and keeping it short and sweet, now the way they write doesn't come into play. It's a very structured bullet points that get to the information that you need. You're keeping things variable. You don't want to hard code things. You want to keep things variable. No different than developing code. When you develop code, most of the time, I would say there's probably 99.99% of the time, you don't want to hard code variables within the actual code, because if something changes, then that hard code doesn't work. If you put in a variable, it allows for broader use of that code. And you actually need to describe what's happening and providing details of the outcome. So how do we look at that from a format perspective? How do we look at bullet points and keeping things from a variable perspective and describing what happens and details? Well, the way it works is you can use different ways to do it, but one of the key things that I like to use and I've seen is IEEE. IEEE has their test cases 829, I believe 829.0, I believe, but I know 829 is that. But IEEE has their test case format, and if you looked at it, it's very consistent. It's easy to review, and there's guidance as to what the actual test case is doing. And in the end, what happens is now you're breaking down these cases into smaller cases. You focus on the one action that gets you one, maybe two outcomes across. And now when you break that down, you no longer have those test cases with 90 some odd steps. Maybe you have between 6 to 10 steps. Even then, that could be a bit much. But if you break it down, if you look at from a condition perspective, you're looking at it from maybe between 3 to 5 specific conditions for that test case. And when you get those 5 conditions, or 6, no more than 6, now your number of steps actually dramatically decreases. And the best part is now you understand what your outcome is. And with that, the naming convention, you're now looking at logical areas, and it's easier to understand where the traceability is. And as we talked about, you have your coding best practices where you're trying to keep things simple, you're focused and targeting. Test cases should be just the same. Your repository should be just the same. It should be very simple, it should be focused and targeted. So keeping it simple makes it easier for everyone to understand. So we've gone through the naming convention. So the naming convention, everyone understands what test cases are where, and it can be easily reviewed. That with now the test case description, you don't have to go too much. People aren't going to review the steps. Maybe they will. But if you have a good description detailing what the conditions, the input, the expected output, and what the process is, now they'll understand what that test case is. And it's actually going to help the tester write the test case steps to get across. And in the end, you're actually reducing debt. Now, when I talk about debt, here is you're now reducing the number of test cases stored within the repository, because now you're being more and more structured. One area that I worked with a long time ago, they had an app for setting up reward programs and identifying potential clients, potential reward programs that they should be using. Now, that application was a web app, and when we looked at the repository, there were 15,000 test cases. And going through, it didn't make sense, like why there would be that many test cases for this particular web app. So we were going through them, and as we were going through them, this is where we found the issues of duplication and in a file structure that didn't make any sense, where we were finding some test cases that had 5, 6 times been rewritten and reused. And we found that there were some releases where some of those cases that had the duplicate and triplicates, they're rerunning those cases within the same release. So they're over testing one area when now there's potential other areas where things were being missed or potentially being missed. So as we went through, we decreased the debt and we actually improved the flow. We moved within a couple months doing a review and rewriting the cases and creating this structure. We were able to move from 15,000 to 7,500 within a month and a half. And then as time went on, we were actually able to reduce it more. Within another couple months, we were able to reduce it down to 2,500. And there was still room for improvement, and we were improving the flow because now with this structure, the team was now more effective in how they tested and what they tested. So we see it as like building blocks, right? So you have the name and convention, you have the file structure, you have the description set in place. You're creating building blocks to build the right wall to ensure that you are mitigating all the risks, the right risks, to ensure that the product that goes out there is a quality product for your clients. Now, one of the things that we can look at is that if you, again, we go back to that 15,000 test cases, it's overload. It's too much work to redo. So us as a team, we worked together and figured out a way to rewrite those cases, restructure those cases as the work was going along. We were ensuring that the a little extra work was done for future use for effective and efficient ways of getting testing completed. And we found that there were some delays that happened when we did this, and we found that there was delays within projects as well if we didn't do this. So it was kind of a, when we were speaking with management at the time, they didn't want to go through the work because they found delays. They found that they thought it would take too long and delay the projects. And when we went back to them, we said that yes, there will be delays, but we're having delays now. And if we keep incurring this debt of test cases and rerunning cases and creating more work than we actually need to do, then what could happen is that it's just going to compound. So creating this is also going to make things shorter and the push to get products out the door. And what's going to happen is clients are going to find those issues. And when clients find those issues, that's a problem. Like, I'm not talking about those small issues that, oh, there's a misspelling here, or they don't particularly like the color of a button. Maybe there's a transaction that's missing. Maybe there's somebody being billed more than what they should because of something wasn't looked at more effectively and efficiently. And when we're looking at that with these cases, now you're looking at reporting issues. So again, back to that 15,000 test case program. How do you report on 15,000 cases? The mind would just look at that, an executive would look at that, and I've been through it, where executives look at reports from an execution perspective, and they see the number of cases that need to be run, and they will just be exasperated. They can't believe that an application that is being tested this much with this number of test cases, one, is taken so long, but also how many issues are being found by clients, even though we're doing all this testing. And part of the reason is that we're not doing the right testing. Maybe most of the high risk areas are being tested, yes, but maybe there's scenarios that are not being looked at. Maybe there's just over testing in one area just based on trying to identify the right cases, and things aren't being reused. So we need to ensure that we get to more effective execution. So when you have the structure, when you have the description in place, you are now in an environment where you can be more effective and efficient in what you're executing against. And with that, you're now creating a better flow. So you've created now a test cases with these descriptions, with these structure and naming conventions where you build on each other. So that test case we brought up a while ago where it was 96 steps, there were, as we went through them, there were actually 10 test cases within those 96 steps, 10 initial test cases, because they were each providing a separate outcome and action as you're going through a certain number of steps. And if you look at it back from a reporting perspective, if you have that one test case with 96 steps and you fail it, but you fail it within halfway through it, the 45th step, that means the first part of the test case passed. Everything was fine. And because that test case is now stopped and there's being work done on it, the other 45 steps or so are not being run. And you're impeding the rest of the flow where you can't automate or you can't flow through. And let's just say they fix that 45th step. Great. And you rerun that test case. Now the 50th step fails. And you're marking that test case as fail again. It's just an ongoing problem. But if you create the flow and where you build on top of each other, you're now creating an opportunity where you can simulate past and maybe run those additional test cases to ensure that that flow works. So you have now a workaround to build on that flow. And then when the problem is fixed, you rerun that flow to ensure that everything is fine. And then you're reducing that frustration. Again, back to those 15,000 test cases. We've been through it where we had to talk senior management and senior leadership why the number of cases was needed. And it was based on the information we had at the time. And so they were getting frustrated because of the time it would take to run these cases. When we did these changes, when we moved to a more structured environment, there were much easier conversations to have with senior leadership, with project managers, with everyone from how we're doing the flow. And understanding this flow made it much more effective because now everyone understood what was going on. So they were no longer frustrated. They had that understanding. They would still ask questions, but now those questions that are involved are more about, okay, how can we make things better? How can we push this along so that we can be more effective? Instead of, why are you taking so long? Why are you worrying about these type of test cases? Why are you doing this? So to reduce that, when you're reducing this frustration, you're now creating a better team environment because now there's that knowledge sharing. Everyone understands. And now you're no longer creating that huge repository that you're trying to hold back and trying to store to get your work done. You've now created a more effective environment to push, to use. So when you do this, you're looking at a test and an outcome, and then that outcome could lead into another test. And then the outcome of that will lead into another test. When you're creating that flow, you're now building that wall. You've now effectively and efficiently created a nice flow of cases to get the work done. And now you also have an environment where your inventory is decreased. Your number of test cases is actually decreased. Again, we went from 15,000 to 7,500 to 2,500, where in the end, we had close to maybe 1,200 cases when everything was all said and done. And even of those 1,200 cases, they were still finding duplicates. But what was happening was we were creating a better repository an inventory where we can identify where these cases are and what they need to do and how to get there. And it's also easier to identify gaps. When you have a simple repository with simple naming conventions, simple test cases to review, simple descriptions, followed by easy steps using variables, now you're able to identify the gaps where maybe something could be missed. Maybe there needs to be another test case added, or maybe these obsolete test cases are no longer needed and you're just kind of running them just for the sake of running them. And it's not just how the test team becomes more efficient. You're now looking at how the team becomes more efficient, because now they can sit there and identify potential issues with the software, with the programs that maybe clients aren't using anymore. And it gives information back. There's that feedback going back to everyone, every stakeholder, to understand what needs to get done, what could be done, what could be more effective, what could be more innovative, what could we do with these features maybe they're not being used to make them better. And here I talk about guidance and governance. Yes, like there is some guidance and governance on how the test cases are run. If we go from an agile perspective, governance is uh, seen as a kind of as a no-no. The teams run as they do. They want to be more effective, but it's more guidance, the way to see it, the way the test cases are run. Depending on the organization, there may be government audits, and having a good, clean repository and understanding your runs, understanding the test cases. If you ever have to go through an audit, it is very easy now to go through it. Yes, there are test case applications that will show what was done during the run. But you can also use these cases to go through from a flow perspective. And if you have, say, a governance issue, a governance application that the government is looking at and does audits against, you can now have those test cases within the repository and within the flow so that you're continuously running those audit type test cases, and you automate them. And once they're with all that traceability and automate, if you ever have to go through an audit, it's now much easier to go through a flow and prove that the application is working as it should. So we need to ensure that everything in the end with these test cases, with the test case description, the format, the layout, the steps, the flow, is making things easy for knowledge sharing. And when you have a good knowledge sharing environment and the messaging is consistent across with the test cases, now it's easy street. You've now created a team environment where everyone works together. And in doing so, you're avoiding headaches. You are not creating problems. Issues are resolved. People understand what's going on and they're keeping informed. And in doing so, now you have everyone that's on the same page, everyone working together to create the pieces, to create the product that everyone wants to provide to their clients of high quality. So a structured test case environment, a test case repository, is one part of the puzzle to success. It is what will get you where you need to go to ensure that everything is flowing, that everything is being more effective and efficient. The teams are working together to get to where you need to get. And in doing so, it's just getting started. It's all part of your continuous improvement. Remember, quality assurance is mitigating issues sooner before they happen and for continuous improvement. And just doing a good test case repository is a good building block in creating that type of environment. So in the end, what did we learn over the past 45 minutes? Test case writing should be no different than development practices. Without a good flow, there could be over testing in one area over others. And there's potential holes created because of such, and then clients will discover those issues. So how do we get forward? You work with the teams. Don't go unilaterally. There shouldn't be one person that does the process. And make sure that it's the best fit for the team. The naming convention I brought up was a Dewey Decimal System. It's relatively consistent across. You can make it the way you see fit within your organization, within the application. But above all else, you want to create a format and naming convention that is consistent and easy to use. The less complicated it is, the easier for all the other stakeholders to understand and flow. It will take time. But in the end, during this, you can have those quick hits. As I said, that program with the 15,000 test cases, we worked through it over time. And as we are going through them over the months and removing those duplicate cases, creating the better repository, we were becoming more and more efficient in what we were doing. And because we were becoming more efficient, it now allowed for additional features to come in that they didn't think they could do because of the way testing was being done. And you do it over time. Like I said, you don't do it in one quick run, one quick hit. That's basically stopping your test team from doing any other sort of work. You can write as you go along. You can find them as you go along. And what will get you there? So IEEE is an internationally identified standard. It's a good standard to use. It's a good flow from a guidance perspective to give you that understanding. And in the end, what you're doing is you're providing guidance and rules that are easy to follow. And you're creating a now focused enterprise QA strategy. So who is an enterprise QA strategy for? Well, it gives guidance to test managers, any QA executives, and technology executives. This strategy makes it easy, enterprise strategy makes it easy for them to have a consistent message in getting the work done. So in the end, you could not change. You could keep things as the status quo, keep the repository as it is, and continuously run into problems where it's just going to exponentially continue to grow. And you'll get to a tipping point where things need to happen. And by the time you hit that tipping point, it's not too late, but now more work is needed than what could have been done if we start working on it now. So why was this done? Why did this webinar come up? Is, again, based on my experience, is there had to be a better way. There was a better way to get through it. And I needed to work with teams to help them understand. And as we were going through it, it worked. There was a way to get it done. So here, I know this can work for any organization. It's just leveraging the experience and getting it done right is what will get there. So one of the things that we're doing is in February and March of 2021, we are having a test managers conference and workshop. And here it is for anyone within QA, for management, leadership, executives, or like future leaders that want to go through. We're being very accommodating in that it is an online workshop for only 2 hours a week for 6 weeks. So the way it works is because we're doing this virtual, we have group sessions. We'll have it scheduled for 2 hours in one day. We'll have some group sessions. We'll discuss issues that are coming up And the test case repository, we could talk about this again during this workshop. As you go through, the website's there. You can sign up. Right now, the rate is lowered for the next month between now and December. And from December onward, I believe the price will be increasing. And in the new year, the price will be increased up to the normal price before we go in. So now is the time, especially with everything that's kind of going on. Now is a great time to turn things around and create that better, positive environment. And in registering for this conference, we'll give you additional ideas to help that QA environment. So similar workshops, if you look at them, they go for close to between 1,500 to 3,000 US. This one here is $800 final at the last price, plus tax and depending what area you're in. And we need to understand that the value for this is key. One, you are not taking 1 or 2 days away from the office. It's just 2 hours a week. And it's over time, and you're going to be getting a lot of thought leaders helping you out, understanding, working through these problems. If you have any questions, here's a way you can contact me. There's my email address. And thank you and have a good day.